Hello, everybody, and welcome to this segment of Techbeat. Super excited to be with you today and have my esteemed guest, Tara Spalding, join me. I'll bring Tara up here in just a minute. Before I do that, I did want to get through a couple of housekeeping items. My name is Earl Foote. I am founder CEO of Nexus IT. Nexus is an outsourced IT and cybersecurity firm based here in northern Utah and servicing a nationwide footprint. We're happy to have you here on Techbeat with us, where leaders learn, innovate, and grow. By way of announcements, Nexus IT will be involved in and sponsoring managing all of the technology for the All-Star Bazaar next weekend here in Salt Lake City. For those of you that are based here in Utah, you probably know NBA All-Star Weekend is happening next weekend for the first time in 30 years here in Utah. It's kind of a big deal. There are a lot of different events going on. We are directly involved in this event that is celebrating Black History Month. It will be highlighting our Black community here in Utah, Black businesses, Black artists. There will be a Ferris wheel, ice skating rink, a merry-go-round, along with displays from artists and a whole bunch of activations. I believe there's going to be some performances and stuff as well. So check that out. Information about All-Star Bazaar is on our pages at Nexus IT, my LinkedIn. I believe if you check out our website and the blog, there's some information there as well. I did want to just thank Silicon Slopes for hosting us here in their podcast studio. We're here with Dave and Connor, who do all the production here, along with Mallory Lovestad, our director of marketing. I want to thank all them for the work they do and the help that they give to produce Techbeat here. A reminder that Techbeat is now available on all major platforms. So we would love your support and subscriptions. Go out and support us. Subscribe. You can consume these episodes and all the great information from great leaders and founders, all of the lessons that they've learned throughout their careers, and the cool, thought leadership that they provide. You can consume that anywhere that you find yourself in audio or video format. Did want to remind everybody that we do, as applicable, we take live questions throughout these segments. So any platform that you're joining us from, feel free to post comments or questions in the chat. We'll get around to as many of those as we can. We will try to get to some of those at the end of the hour as well. Also, I just wanted to quickly give everybody a preview, into the episodes we have coming up and the leaders that will be joining me here on Techbeat over the next several months. So we have on the 21st of this month, Trina Limpert, the CEO of Rise Next and Tech Moms, Tim Cooley that will be joining me. He's the author of the Pitch Deck book, quite relevant to our topic today. He'll be joining me on March 7th. Dustin Kenyon and Rob Pilecki, co-founders of Washi, on March 23rd. Romaine Marshall, one of the nation's foremost cyber and privacy attorneys. He'll be joining me in April on the 11th. Jeff Erickson, he runs strategic partnerships at Forecaster, and he's an angel investor. He'll be joining me May 11th. We also have Monte Deer, the CEO of Kizik, coming up in June. Johnny Hanna, co-founder of Homey, and Derek Miner and Greg Trimble, co-founders of Lemonade Stand, that are all slated to join me here over the next 5 or 6 months. So keep an eye out for announcements around those segments. We'd love to have you join us for those. All right, so let's get to my guest of the hour, none other than the lovely, bubbly Tara Spalding. Tara, it's such a pleasure to have you here on Techbeat with me today. Let me introduce you real quick to the audience, and then we'll come around and let you talk a little bit about yourself and some of your background. So Tara Spalding is the interim CEO and CPO at venturecapital.org, a Utah-based nonprofit organization that assists, coaches, and provides mentoring to entrepreneurs who are raising investment capital. Tara is also the chairperson at WeAngels.capital, providing an educational program and community-advised investment path to activate investors who intend to support women-founded and gender-diverse businesses in Utah and surrounding states. Tara, Welcome.
Earl, it is my pleasure to be here today and on Techbeat. My goodness, I feel like I've hit a new level in my status. Thank you so much for putting me here.
We've hit a new level by landing you as a guest. That's the way this is going down, Tara.
Well, Earl, I love what you and Silicon Slopes and Nexus IT are doing for the community. Listening to the speakers that you have coming up, Trina, Jeff Erickson, Tim Cooley, Dustin, Monty, like these people are my friends. I have been in complete admiration as to what they've achieved, and each of these stories are going to be fantastic for Silicon Slopes audience to hear about. So,
Yeah.
yeah, this is amazing.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Lots of really inspiring leaders that have joined us in the past and will be joining us in the future here on Techbeat. But let's get to you, Tara. You're also an inspiring leader who has been very instrumental in connecting founders to the capital they need to build the businesses that they dream about, right? Let's go way back though. Let's talk about Tara Spalding, the kid, right? Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about, where you grew up, how you grew up, and how that led into your career choice and ultimately, being part of, the Utah startup and venture ecosystem with Boom Startup and now Venture Capital.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Earl, it's quite a funny story. In fact, and something that I'm happy to share is that I'm a pretty much a nomad. I've lived in 8 states 10 different times in my life growing up. When I was basically 8 years old, I was living in Texas, and my family actually got divorced and separated. And my father and I would spend like 2 weekends a month together. What we would do during those weekends were very special moments and times for my brother and I. And one of the things that we often did was race go-karts, because in Texas, everything is just out there. It's a whole bunch of fun. And for several years growing up, in Texas and following, I just actually had a passion and just a very strong interest on driving, and at a very young age. So basically, when I turned 16, I was quite an experienced driver. Yet I didn't own a car, and my father was, in fact, one of my biggest encouraging people in my life to say, this is something that makes you happy, so why don't you just have a great time. And when I graduated high school, he brought me into a performance driving school, and that school was in Canada, and it was literally just a school, but I went through the experience and the opportunity of learning how to really drive fast cars. In fact, it was Corvettes, and I'm a massive Corvette fan. Fun fact. And
These are not things I knew about you. This is cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So, like I said, it's kind of a wild story.
yeah.
But the performance school is something that I actually did quite well at. Being young and being a student, I was really used to the classroom setting, but people who typically go to performance schools just want to get into the machines and rip them around the track. And this track that was in Canada was 2.5 miles. There were 14 different turns and changing, angles, etc., which actually made it dangerous. So you had to pay attention to the class and to
Okay.
the course. And being 16, just graduating from high school, I was used to it. So I paid attention, which actually put me at an advantage because I learned how to drive the track very well. And because of such, basically, I was the best driver. They invited me back to a private race. Again, I succeeded really well. And I was provided the opportunity to either go down the path of becoming a race car driver for IMSA or to go to college. And I was accepted at the University of Colorado in Boulder. It was like 3 weeks before I was supposed to move into my new dorm room as a freshman, or I can stay in Canada and race cars. And my father was certainly, and always have been and always will be, like my biggest advocate. But he was like, make sure that you don't confuse like what passion is with like where your direction is in life. And so I decided to go to college instead of pursuing the path of being a race car driver.
Yeah.
But while I was, in those performance goals and racing these, I went from a normal, a regular engine Corvette to a ZR1, which is a much stronger, bigger engine car. Is that mentoring and precision is really, really important. And I also figured out there's three things that are really important in paradigms in life. One, you can control yourself the most. When it comes to the performance of the car, you can pretty much control it, but things happen. Like your tires blow. Other things like that can happen. Brakes don't perform as fast as you want; they're too hot. And the things that you can't control is really the track, and you just got to learn how to adapt accordingly. So I think it was a very important lesson in my life very early on. That's like, all right, surround myself with good mentors, figure out exactly what I control, and then adapt and react to the things that I couldn't. Continuing on, college was a blast. Boulder, I did a lot of skiing. So obviously it's the reason why I love living out here in Utah is I'm
Yeah.
certainly a mountain girl.
Yeah.
And
See,
after
I see on your Instagram most weekends you're out skiing with the family.
I know, I
Yeah.
know, I know. It's my reset button, work hard, play harder.
Yeah.
But my gosh, I began a career right after graduating college in the wine business and went through a few years of sales, which also gave me the courage to find my voice, learn about presentation, reading situations. Eventually, I moved to or got promoted into the headquarters of that winery. And I was really frustrated as well. I was frustrated with processes and I was fascinated with coding. So I taught myself how to code after graduating college and built their first intranet site. And the reason why I built the intranet site was to really like capture and manage orders that were really important for marketing. And believe it or not, it worked. I, I was just more of a persistent person on learning how to code. But that was absolutely fascinating. And that then uh, opened up a new door for my career trajectory to become like a webmaster, moved to Silicon Valley, and then just got really sucked up into the whole tech space. And so, that was basically, around the turn of the century. I was in Santa Clara and just kind of had that wonderful, wonderful ride in enterprise software space. So I have a couple of stories,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so going back, we almost had Danica Patrick 2.0 here.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, yeah. Which is cool. I had no idea that you race cars. I think one thing that I picked up on here that I don't know if everybody else picked up on, but you said you graduated high school at 16 years old.
17, yeah.
17. Okay. All right. All right. So was
Yeah.
that early or was it on time?
So I went to, yes, I went early. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't do an accelerated high school. I just went into kindergarten, I guess, early for normal, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, overall, we're talking to a very sharp gal who, graduated high school at 17, raced cars, taught yourself how to code, and ultimately become a webmaster. And then, okay, so webmaster to venture, quite a difference. Tell us a little bit about how that transition happened.
Earl, it was actually a rocket ship of a ride. In Silicon Valley, there was just so many quick, what I call burst and bloom cycles, and just the immense amount of talent and resources as well as capital was amazingly humbling. I worked for a company called Epiphany at the time, and I was probably like 7 rings down from the CEO, and it was a publicly traded company. So my comprehension as to the importance of stock options, acceleration paths, buyouts, and all that such was actually really honed pretty much in my mid 20s. And so just being in that sort of environment and understanding how, like, basically that's how you advance your career, advance your wealth, was wonderful. And everybody was doing it at that time. Silicon Valley was very much about like rising tide rises all employees.
Yeah.
uh, when I was at Epiphany, I was approached by three other people that were also at Epiphany, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to break out of this company and create our own CRM system." CRM is an acronym for customer relationship management. And they saw how I was doing, marketing and coding and doing these profiling. They're like, "We want you to be our first employee." And I thought it was crazy town. But I was really, really excited because Epiphany was like this massive publicly traded organization. So I said yes. And they closed the Series A, and an hour later, they pulled me out from Draper Fisher Jurvetson. And an hour later, they pulled me out of Epiphany, and I literally signed my employment agreement to be the very first employee at a
Wow.
company called Sugar CRM.
What? Really?
Yeah, yeah, on the back of, one of the guys, I think
We
he
used
drove like
we
a.
used sugar many years ago. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was their first employee,
Yeah.
and I signed my paper on the back of their Toyota Camry, and I'm like, "We're in." And they're like, "Look at this, we're already 25% women," because it was 3 guys that
Mhm.
co-founded it together, and it
Yeah.
was so dang funny. So they got the money. They started the company officially. Beforehand, they were coding at night. Everything was built on the LAMP stack, which acronym for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And I was learning PHP at the time as well. But my role was basically marketing. But I mean, there wasn't anything that we didn't do. Like, I sent faxes, I painted the walls, I threw away the trash, cleaned out the refrigerator. You know how it is at a startup.
Founding team, you do whatever it takes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it was wonderful. And we moved to Cupertino. We chose a headquarters that was basically a quarter mile away from Apple. And I was there for like the first 4 years. I mean, I remember getting our first paid customer, Earl, and it was just such a fantastic moment. Also, because of the term sheet, and we started at Series A back in the day, there wasn't like angel and pre-seed and seed. Like, it was just like Series A, here you go. Don't blow it all in one place. But
Don't
like
blow it on Corvettes.
yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, we certainly didn't. Like, not at all.
Uh,
And I put
I've seen that
everything.
happen, right?
Yeah, and this is also when you're like, "Well, I'm just gonna put it all in employee stock options," right? You
Yeah.
just swing for the fences, especially when you're young and you don't have responsibilities, and it's cost of living is you're basically living in your office. So
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
but that was the beginning of my starstruck journey in Silicon Valley, and really getting to know like the enterprise software tech space. Is that, first off, everybody coded at some sort of level and extent. There was always like this rapid innovation, agile cycles, development cycles started there, as well as enterprise software selling and solution-based selling, etc. So I was just really lucky to just be at the heart of the matter as it was developing. Over time, I became the VP of corporate marketing for Sugar CRM. Then I moved on to becoming the chief marketing officer at another open source company that was into system and network monitoring. And then I was the VP of marketing at another startup, which was a middleware stack. And then after the third like executive position, having a board, raising over $60 million for these companies, I figured that it was time that I did my own thing. And I started an incubator called Henhouse Ventures back in 2012. I also, as a side project, started and funded and sold a company called BenchPick with another gentleman who I'm dear friends with still. And that was also an amazing experience to lead the development cycle, to do the product testing, and to get to get our first small check, and then just sell the company within a few months after. So
Wow.
yeah, crazy Silicon Valley stories. Yours truly.
You've been there and done just about everything. You got the t-shirts. Um, it's,
Too
it's
many t-shirts.
it's pretty cool, and you're like 30, Tara.
Right? You think I am, and I'll let you say that. I would
you,
love
you,
to say I'm a 90s baby, and that's far from the truth.
you've lived quite the life in a short period of time. Um, so let's transition a little bit and let's talk about your current role with commonly known as VCO, but venturecapital.org. You joined up a few months ago. Maybe tell us a little bit about that and you know the mission of venturecapital.org. I'm surprised. A lot of early stage companies, I end up meeting around Utah or beyond. Just in the course of doing business and connecting with people. And I'm surprised with how few people really know what VCO is and why it exists. So maybe let's start there and we can dig deeper into the conversation about how founders can connect capital, right?
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate the opportunity to continue to hit this drumbeat over and over again because eventually it's going to be amplified. And the way it's going to be amplified is by having an open and accepting community, period, full stop. Venturecapital.org is a 501c3 nonprofit. And this is a very new venture for me personally because I come from the world of corporations and funding, etc. So, Kyle, it's a wild ride, but it's really exciting. Venturecapital.org is basically designed to help groom and mentor and educate and train founders to understand and appreciate the different sources of capital before they start pursuing them. And this is a ubiquitous problem across all industries, across all different company maturities and moments. And the reason why is because the capital markets always change. Now, once we provide those education and the grooming, and we have mentoring programs and networking and all this fun stuff, then what we do is we like to connect into the right sources of capital. As a nonprofit, I think it puts us into an advantage because basically we're not biased. And so those who go through a program often say comments of like, I've never heard that before because we don't have like a fund that we're trying to backfill or support or change performance numbers for. And that being like basically a safe ground as a third party, I think our feedback is better received. Now, the power of our community is pretty upstanding. First off, did you know that venturecapital.org is in its 40th year of existence?
Wow.
Yes,
Extraordinary. I
it
did
was
not realize that.
I mean, founded in 1983 by two gentlemen, Dr. Wayne Brown and also Brad Bertosh. And Brad, in fact, has been an active participant for the first 39 years of the program in a leadership role. Now he's still leading through mentoring, but it's just absolutely wonderful to have such amazing, long-standing legacy, especially here in the Utah community, to always be contributing.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting to see the work that VCO does, the impact it has. You know, uh, Utah is a hotbed right now for startups, right?
Yeah.
Consistently named the number one market for startups in the United States right now. It's a place where dreamers come to build, right? A place where people are allowed to dream. The problem is that a dream to reality, there is a massive gap, right? And particularly for first-time founders who have never navigated that gap before. And so, for me, that's one of the big things that I see with VCO when first-time founders come to me, and that I do a little bit of mentoring casually, but I want to plug that in with VCO and make it more official per se, right? And by the way, for those that are joining us, I know you mentioned it, but just to to hone in on that point, VCO, first of all, nonprofit, it does not cost you as a founder to get involved. You have to apply, but you get access to mentors, to groups of mentors who have been there, done that, who have built businesses, oftentimes exited multiple businesses, who have raised capital, who can help you bridge the gap of dream to actual, knowledge and execution. Which for a first-time founder, that is a daunting sort of, a daunting journey to go from I've got an idea to how do I actually build the idea, and then how do I fund the idea, right? And once I've got traction and I've actually got revenue, how do I scale it? It's all all very new to a lot of people, and so VCO exists in the space for me that is so critical right now, especially here in Utah again, with so so many people that have ideas, that are trying to build something, but really don't have the knowledge or resources to get there. Kudos to you and your team for what you're doing. You joined from Boom Startup, which has been transferred into VCO at this point.
Yes.
As the chief programming officer of VCO, promptly took over the interim CEO role for now. Tell us a little bit about, before we get, deeper into capital, tell us a little bit about the future, the vision of VCO, where it's going, and where you see yourself having a significant impact.
Yeah, well, actually, before I go into the vision of VCO, Earl, I think what you said is very important and impactful. And I'd like to ask you a question, which is when you were founding.
That's not allowed here, Tony.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because I know listeners want to hear this, but when you were founding Nexus IT and you were putting together your business plan and assessing this, did you have mentors or advisors walk you through this process?
Yeah, so we're talking about 25 years ago, right? And at that time, of course, Silicon Valley was a hotbed of startup activity.
Yeah.
Utah was not really, right? And the ecosystem that exists in Utah today did not exist 25 years ago, not even to really much of an extent at all. You had, you had a few organizations, right? And a few peer groups or networking groups and stuff like that. Venture capital was really just starting to, become a thing. In fact, I went to breakfast this morning with one of the gentlemen who started the very first venture capital fund in Utah, right? Who started a company called Landesk that was acquired by Intel. But access to all that was not prolific in Utah at that time. I was 23 years old. My brother, who co-founded with me at that time, Ryan, would have been 26. Let me think, 26 or 27. We were inexperienced. We had no idea what entrepreneurship was. We had no idea what building a startup was. We barely you had, back in the day, we didn't Google things. We were using like AOL or Yahoo, to search up what is a business plan, or how do you tips on writing a business plan and stuff like that, right? I would say that my early journey was very much hard knocks, until I started to find some mentors, right?
Exactly.
Which took a while. Okay, granted, we figured out a lot of things on our own, right? We had appreciable growth, those first 8 or 10 or 12 years, but it was word of mouth. It was, getting out and pounding the pavement, and extending your networks and all that kind of stuff, which you see us do a lot of today, because we're still bootstrapped, by the way, 25 years later, right? We have not raised external capital, and so very much we're still a grassroots type of organization, who will do the hard work to create the opportunity and the revenue. It was really a process of more trial and error than anything else for us to kind of figure out, how do you build a business, and how do you actually get revenue, and how do you I didn't know how to sell.
And yet and that was 25 years ago when honestly, capital allocations and capital planning was so much more simpler.
Yeah.
Like Earl, when that Series A closed with Sugar CRM, it was pretty straightforward. There was no valuation cap back at that time. You know what I mean? It's just like, here you go, and we're just throwing it together. And that's because we didn't have the data, we didn't have the science, we didn't have the expectations as to how fund performances, et cetera, are today. Now you do added layer of like capital, especially equity based, is even more expensive than it was 18 months ago, right? So if, and you see that in flatten or down valuations for more mature companies. And you're also seeing like with the interest rate hikes, there are change on like venture debt, for example, has also been strongly influenced because we have too many, or not too many, we have more complicated tools nowadays for founders to be considering on how they're going to basically back their growth and their plan without having mentors, without having what you mentioned as like experienced people. It's insanely dangerous.
Yeah.
And so the worst way to crash and burn is because of capital. It's it's a lot easier if you just miss the market timing or just kind of get commoditized, etc. What really sucks is if something so predictable is misunderstood and or over expected on results, right? So I think like going back to what you and I have done when we first started our companies, like we could survive on our own because it wasn't so complicated. But now with everything, like I, it, anybody between like a pre-seed and a Series B should absolutely be using organizations like venturecapital.org because of their mentoring and their connection.
Yeah.
Take a guess on how many mentors we have at venturecapital.org that are participating and supporting members, are our founders right now in this cohort. Just take a guess.
Actively participating right now,
Yeah,
80,
more,
120.
more.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we're at like 130 or 132, if I'm not mistaken. And
Wow.
that's for supporting the 20 companies that are coming to Investors Choice, which is our open annual conference on February 24th. We have 20 presenting CEOs right now. Last year, there were over 200 mentors that basically mentored on average 2 companies per year. But what venturecapital.org does on our mentoring program is that it's structured. And mentors who sign up, which we're always asking for help from, like again, we're an open community. It's a structured 1 hour per week, with the entrepreneur, and it lasts for on average like 6 or 8 weeks. And it really works on like the investment pitch itself. And then once you get into the pitch, then you can see the investment components. And that's how, the secret sauce happens, is just getting bright people to surround the entrepreneur again in a safe, non-judgment, non-performance based environment to really get into the depths of the business and the capital allocation. So
Well,
it's a really cool moment.
the pitch is something that's so misunderstood, too, and really a sticking point for a lot of founders, right? There is an art and there is a science to an effective pitch, right? That is going to pique the interest of an investor, if it's an angel investor or VC or whatever, right? And so the fact that you're helping these founders with a potentially game-changing idea, right? Really craft and hone that, and then prepare them for these events where they actually have the opportunity to go pitch. And if I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if I remember when from a conversation last year, um, I believe that 80% of startups coming out of VCO land funding, and 80% of those are in business after 10 years. Does that sound about right?
So it's 65% land funding
Okay. All
within
right.
the
I was
trailing
high.
12 months. On average, So we have 65 companies that graduated the 2023, or excuse me, the 2022 cohorts. And we expect those 65 companies to raise $45 million before 2024. So it's, and of course, sometimes it's like, half million, couple $1 million raises, but some of them are really big. And so, not saying that everybody succeeds, but the majority succeeds. And so those are sorts of performance results that are super important.
Those are
Now,
pretty good odds though, because like, without the guidance and mentorship, of a program, of a cohort and mentors like BCO, you're like 1 in 100, 2 in 100 or something like
right.
that. It's really low. So I mean that, increase your odds by working with a nonprofit that doesn't cost you, right? Let's. I know you have another comment, and maybe once we go through there, let's talk a little bit more about um, options for capital, right? Most founders seem to think that their only option is to go raise a round, right? Early stage friends and family, and then maybe a pre-seed onto a seed, onto a Series A, graduating through angels into VC and stuff like that. There are other things that you can do, right, to build a business. And so maybe if you want to finish up your thoughts, and let's start talking about
Yeah.
ways to build a business and the types of capital you can land.
Earl, I'm so glad you bring this up because this is something that I'm personally really focused on. As I mentioned before, I started two companies. One of them I sold, in fact, to the people who invested in us. And then the other one I closed down myself. It was a fail, which is fine because both of them are amazing learning experiences. And also, I've personally, as a CEO, have done all sorts of different capital raise, be it debt and equity, as well as non-dilutive, which is really important because each are its own path and direction, as well as expectations as to how the money is deployed and like how it's going to be paid back. At venturecapital.org, as I mentioned before, part of our thing is education. We are, in fact, this month focusing on giving free education for funding sources. We just hosted a beautiful panel at the Silicon Slopes Lehigh just a couple of days ago, and that broadcast is available for people to listen to for very different funding sources and the stories and expectations accordingly. And we also have an education app for free that people can go through and take a little quiz as to like where their business is and what kind of funding sources they should consider. So there's a lot of free stuff and fun stuff that we're offering that I love to communicate and invite, the Silicon Slopes and Techbeat community to pursue. But to answer your question, there's three very simple categories. When it comes to ownership, there's a dilutive category and a non-dilutive category. And then the third is debt. Each of them have their own complexity, and each of them are getting much more creative and complicated just due to the provisions. Going back to the mentoring and going back to even like my driving, experiences when I was a teenager, you have to have the right people to make sure that you're not doing something dangerous. And that can be in a mentor, that can be an advisor, that can be you, Earl. It can be an attorney for reading these terms because there are so many little devils in the detail that can absolutely tank your company if you don't understand truly the implications that you're signing up for. And impatience due to the concern of like running out of cash makes people do brash things. So just be careful and give yourself enough time. For the dilutive category, you and I have been swarming around this, which is like, how do you get investors to come in on part of your company, in exchange for cash? Non-dilutive is actually my favorite category. Oftentimes people think of like grants and pitch competitions, but I love to remind founders that the best non-dilutive capital is sales itself, which Earl is something that I know you do extremely well. which is like just bootstrap and roll your profits back into your business and grow it. That's the best non-dilutive approach possible. Number one, sell. And then, of course, we have debt. Now, debt instruments are now taking on several different flavors. Like I've been seeing some revenue-based financing deals coming up in the last few months. There's of course, like revolving loans, small business loans, etc. Just a whole bunch of variances that are just becoming more popular. But again, be very, very stingy and only take the money that you need for a specific purpose. And make sure you do the math of like the money that you need can be easily repaid in the profits that you expect the money to be allocated towards. So those are the three basic areas.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned something there that I think is important, and that's that if you're going to get dilutive capital, if you're going to get investors in, right, you've got to be able to display to them that you can return, give them a return on investment, them and their LPs, right, a return on investment. You're going to have to figure out how to model or get a CFO that can model, or a partner. There's outsourced partners that can do that for you, right, and help them understand the IRRs that they might make out of the deal and all that kind of stuff, right? And certainly a bank needs to be able to see that you're going to be able to pay back a loan, right?
Yeah.
You talked about just get out and create some revenue, right? And that it's so discounted in today's mindset. I think it seems that so many founders kind of just think I have to raise capital. I have to raise capital, and there's no other way. And even okay, granted, there are businesses where you have to raise capital to get off the ground, right? But even a lot of tech founders, SaaS companies, they're like, the only way for me to get off the ground here, is to go raise some capital. And honestly, like a venture investor wants to see how scrappy you are.
That's
They
right.
want to see if you have enough vision, and if you can pitch well enough that you can go create a founding team who's willing to take equity, a CTO who can build the product and get you to your MVP, your minimum viable product, right? If you can get a CRO in that can start to sell, and craft your marketing strategy, and begin to get organic growth in the door. People forget about this kind of stuff. I see some really scrappy tech founders who are, they start kind of in a tech-enabled sort of mode, a tech-enabled services, I should say, sort of mode, which is, we're still tech-enabled services as a managed service provider, right? But they start in a tech-enabled services mode. They have knowledge and skill to be able to offer and trade time for money, so that they can raise capital to build a product and then begin to sell that product, right? And a lot of founders just kind of forget these things.
Yeah, you're so right on. And like, because I was in Silicon Valley in the early 20s for like the first like bubble crash. Vaporware was coined because I lived through it. And it was basically, there was too much money. That was part of the problem. And there was such like, that was the birth of FOMO. And I think both evils just kind of turned into like a superstorm. I have no other way to put it. But the thing is that developers were so fascinated with development, and investors were so fascinated to like just continue their NASCAR slides of like, I'm backing these founders and these cool, like weirdly spelled names, that they really forgot that innovation needs to be solving a proven problem in a proven format. And that was part of the reasons why when I moved from Silicon Valley out to Utah, that I actually was like, oh, refreshing. But yeah, it was quite cowboy, because like I didn't see a maturity in like forecasting and predictability, as well as return on investment. But that's bubbled up in the last 10 years since I've lived here, by the way. Like, yay, I'm so proud of where Utah is, but I don't want Utah to fall into like that, like I look so great in the mirror, sort of self-serving, excuse me, I'm using the wrong word, but like a selfish and like I'll pat myself on the back cycle, where then the market moves by us because we're just, cocky or complacent or think everything's fine. So the thing is that I applaud people like Taylor Bennett, uh, Curtis Howe, Chad Jardine, like these three individuals are constantly talking about how to hack and start selling before you even have a product, right? And, I super applaud that because it's not about the innovation, it's about solving the customer's pain and then building backwards.
Yeah.
One of my mentors from Silicon Valley always said, "You're always building MVP, Tara. Like when and this is when I was running product for Benchpick, when I co-founded it, I was like, oh, when am I getting out of this MVP stage? And they're like, you should never build anything extra that people won't pay for. And like, I got the total smackdown from someone highly regarded in Palo Alto. And then I realized, like, you like, if you're running engineering and you're running product, just do just enough to like change the monetization and then stop. Don't do a penny more because then you're cutting into the profitability. So there's like, that sort of paradigm, and I am really excited for where Utah is going to go from an innovation standpoint, but I do think like the funding needs to be fair and balanced for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about changing capital markets right now.
Yeah.
The last 12 to 18 months have been a moving target, obviously, with economic cooling off at the moment, right? And massive cutbacks, in the tech sector and all that kind of stuff. And everybody wondering if we're circling the drain, right? There's, last I saw, and I don't know how accurate today. I mean, we're, early February, but last I saw in Q4 in the US, there was $290 billion of dry powder, which means, venture funds, VC funds, and PE funds had raised $290 billion from LPs, from limited partners, from investors that are sitting in funds ready to deploy, but has not been deployed. This week alone here in Utah, Kickstart announced a new $230 million fund.
Mhm.
Mercado yesterday announced a new $400 million fund, right? So there is money out there right now, right? The landscape has changed, though. Landing that money is different today than it was 18 months ago or 24 months ago. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. As we get smarter and we're more fine-tuned when it comes to financial services and financial performance, so rises the expectations onto the preparation and return performance for every single investment. And so that really creates basically a down pressure that the earlier you are in the business and you're starting funding, my goodness, you have to have not only all of your ducks in a row, but you have to be ready and prepared to be compared to other like deals. The money is here for a reason, and that's because the innovation is here. And if there wasn't a rapid growth in innovation, there wouldn't be that sort of supply of investment available as well. So, kudos to us for being just kind of one of these regenerative communities. Additionally, the great thing about the state of Utah is that we're one of the most diverse when it comes to industry, backing our state GDP. And so, like, if one sector, such as tech, drops, then we'll see an increase in other areas. Maybe it's transportation, like something super weird, but that's just kind of the cool thing about this highly dynamic state. As for the funds, yes, of course, the funds, like you mentioned, the limited partners who invested in it have a return performance expectation. And now is actually a wonderful time for funds to be invested because I wouldn't say like it's cooling off. I would say it's more normalizing because what was happening, the first year post COVID was somewhat crazy town. I was certainly worried because valuations were being stated that, I was like, gosh, this is like another vaporware hype cycle. Like, we need to look at profitability. We need to look at like true growth. We need to look at true traction. And you mentioned like part of my past, was the accelerator, and my goodness, like that's exactly where we put a lot of our time and effort. is the provability of what was done in the actuals, be it like sales, user adoption, expenditures, and how to correctly, forecast it. And I know you have like Jeff Erickson coming up from Forecaster. So,
Yep.
like, Earl, have questions that you need to ask him and like get his whole viewpoint. But I think tools like what Forecaster does and all of these things like the the expectations and the accuracy that entrepreneurs are expected to now hit to receive this sort of capital, like all of the bars are raising.
Yeah, yeah. So what I've been seeing, I do sit on a few advisory boards, and sit on the board of directors at Pando, which is an entrepreneurial ecosystem, community, and certainly interact with a lot of entrepreneurs and early stage and startup, sort of organizations. What I've been seeing is that deals are happening, even pre-revenue, pre-seed, seed type of deals are happening. Um, and then of course your kind of mid stage, a series A and B type of deals, they're still happening. Um, what I'm definitely seeing is that in those mid stage or late stage, investors want to see not only a high growth company anymore, they want to see high growth and stable returns, right?
Yes,
Which 24 months ago, high growth cash burning was okay. Today, they're not really interested in burning cash right now, right?
that's right.
Just to inflate numbers and valuations and potentially make an ROI in 3 years, off of the sell, because it's kind of been falsely hyped and falsely inflated, right, on the valuation side. Um, and then on the pre-seed, or excuse me, pre-revenue type of deals, those are harder because you don't have traction, right? You may not even be at MVP. You may be trying to sell somebody on an idea that you have. And I'm seeing that there are still deals happening, but generally most of those deals are going to who to founders and founding teams that have been there and done it before, right? That have had an exit or have had two or three, right? They've got a good idea. They have as you mentioned, a real world problem, and they're able to substantiate with data that there's a real problem that they can really, that they can solve, and that they're able to forecast potential returns out of how they're going to solve that from their revenue model, right? As you mentioned, the level of sophistication you need today as a founder to land capital, particularly investment, I should say. And bank capital, that's entirely different. You're not going to land that really as on an idea, right? But to land investment capital, your level of sophistication has to be significantly higher.
That's
And candidly, if you're burning cash like crazy right now, you're probably not going to raise that next round unless your traction is so incredibly impressive, right? Otherwise, you got to be thinking about other things, right?
absolutely. And like, it's wonderful because I've had, in this role, been working with several entrepreneurs, and I've had, again, true conversations around unit economics. And, honestly, there was no such thing as unit economics in 2021 and the beginning of 22, right? Like it just wasn't there. And honestly, I think it's going back to really sound business fundamentals that then people are really aligned to. And my one of our panelists that we had on the Raising Capital Education series on Tuesday was Jackie Elliott. Jackie's a fantastic person. She manages Silicon Valley Bank here in Utah, and she had the most funniest saying, which was like, look, the second you bring an investor on board, it's like getting into a marriage that is going to end in a divorce. But you want the divorce to be as amicable as possible, alluding to like some sort of like a prenup engagement. So the other thing that we haven't talked about, Earl, is like, the second you're looking at this capital, the capital wants to be repaid, especially if you go down this equity path. You put in some realistic expectations and valuations, etc., and have these true conversations of what the exit should be and where you want to basically see this company grow and then stop and sell. I remember in signing the dissolution papers for BenchPick with Steve, my co-founder, after we got acquired. And it was like one of these really weird moments where I'm like, okay, done. And then I was like, wow, was that worth it? And like, oh, yeah, I guess, but that whole dissolution moment is something that people should absolutely be talking about, especially with those that are backing you from an equity basis.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So Tara, we only have a few more minutes here. And I know I haven't paid attention to questions because this has been a fascinating conversation. I do, there are some questions that it may make sense to come back around to, if you want to check out the threads on LinkedIn and stuff. But I think the last question I have, and I've noticed VCO making a significant, maybe not call it a shift, but an emphasis in diversity, right? In making sure that your services are available to those who traditionally would not have a lot of this opportunity. So let's cap out the hour. Tell us a little bit about that and the future of where that goes with VCO, and any other final thoughts that you might have for our guests today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, diversity is a really simple thought. More diversity, better returns, period, full stop. And it's something that venturecapital.org truly does believe in. In fact, out of the 64 graduating CEOs, 32 of them were female. And so, 50% of people that go through our program are female and male. I know. And we were also just selected as one of the top 100 entities in the state of Utah to elevate women, which was, just announced, I believe, yesterday, which I'm like totally giddy about. The thing is that minorities, veteran women, rural people are at a disadvantage because they don't have that immediate network. They don't have the access to the resource and the education. And so we're working really hard to focus on that. We have a women entrepreneur program as well as a women angel investment education program. Fun fact, Earl, did you know that we have about 1,000 active angel investors in the state of Utah?
I didn't know. Yeah, I would have thought 300, 400 maybe. Yeah.
Well, but still, like you
Yeah.
think about all of these businesses and like what Kickstart has on fund and ready to go.
Yeah.
Like that first round of capital, like from like sophisticated angel investors that can really like advocate without like making a mistake, it's still not enough. It's like it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And they're primarily men. I have friends that run syndications like Beehive VC, Luke and Landon over at Tribe. And primarily their members are men at syndication. And so the problem is without female angel investors here in the state,
Yeah.
female-centric businesses are not getting the attention. So we're doing a huge effort not only to promote women entrepreneurism, but also to generate and educate more, primarily women, but anybody who'd be interested in backing women-owned businesses. So that's our initiative for 2023, and we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that's really cool. As you mentioned, I mean, of course, a focus on diversity, on inclusion is it's the right thing to do ethically, morally, right? But it pencils out better on paper.
Mhm.
It's data proves time and time and time again that more diverse organizations create better returns, right?
Yes.
That's that is a proven fact, and at this point, it's certainly time for Utah also to come of age and begin to offer more opportunity, to female founders, to founders in underserved communities, right? So I'm glad, I'm encouraged to see you, taking the helm at VCO right now, to see VCO begin to usher in a new era of inclusivity when it comes to access and opportunity to entrepreneurship, right? That's cool, and that will continue to level up. You mentioned, and it's one of my favorite kind of philosophies, and that is a rising tide lifts all ships, right? The more abundance and prosperity we create as an ecosystem, the more we lean into each other, the more we help each other, the more future economic activity we will create, which benefits us all, our families, our at some point, we're not there yet, Tara, but our grandchildren at some point, right? It's going to happen. But anyways, Tara, this has been quite a delight to have you on this hour. Yeah, it's been fantastic. Any parting words before we wrap, real quick?
No, I just want to thank everyone for paying attention and joining us. And if you have any sort of inquiries about venturecapital.org, obviously our name is the website. If you didn't get that, just that's all you do is type that in. And then the other thing is like you can find me on LinkedIn. And we're here to just, create better returns through more diversity and education and connection. So thank you for joining.
Yeah. Thanks so much again, Tara. Thank you to all of our guests who have joined us for this hour of Techbeat. We hope that this has been super valuable. It has for me. Again, keep an eye out for all the awesome announcements for the upcoming guests that we have in the coming months. Tara and I are going to sign off. We wish you a blessed afternoon. We'll see you all.